All right, as we finish our journey through the first HSP Owner's Guide, we are going to look at hypervigilance in this episode of the Gentle Rebel podcast, which is the kind of feeling of being permanently switched on, unable to stop our nervous system from scanning and perceiving potential dangers everywhere, even when we're in relatively safe environments. We're going to explore how the natural, useful trait of vigilance in sensory processing sensitivity allows the sensitive person to get a handle on what's happening around them, to be aware of where they are, to read the room, to invite that ability to notice and filter subtle cues. But then how this can sometimes tip into hypervigilance. So we'll think about why this might happen, and where this can occur, especially in a world that rewards this sort of constant busyness, this constant state of performance and that kind of thing as well. So we'll consider some of the everyday signs that hypervigilance might be happening in a highly sensitive person, and why it's such a common experience for HSPs, and ways that we might gently bring ourselves back into a state of equilibrium, safety, connection.
We're about to witness the greatest miracle of the machine age.
The Gentle Rebel Podcast.
I'm so glad you could come. This is going to be such an exciting day. I hope you enjoy it. I think you will.
Hey, so welcome to the Gentle Rebel podcast, where we explore the intersection of high sensitivity, creativity, and the cultures that we swim in. I'm Andy Mort, and it is lovely to be with you. I hope you're doing well. I'd love to hear from you. If there's anything in this episode that resonates or sparks questions in you, please do feel free, as always, to get in touch through the website, through the Haven, the-haven.co. So as I said, we're kind of opening up the section of the HSP Owner's Guide on the topic of hypervigilance. So that guide is a small mini zine pocketbook. So space in it was rather limited. So I wanted to just spend a bit of time getting deeper into it in this episode. What does hypervigilance look like? What does it mean in practice? How can it show up for sensitive people in day-to-day life? And what can we do to meet it with a sense of creative gentleness? I want to say I'm not coming at this from a clinical perspective on complex individual trauma. Rather, I will look at hypervigilance largely through a sociological and cultural lens as something that might emerge when a sensitive nervous system is acting in a natural way in environments and conditions that aren't necessarily conducive to its natural processes. So that's a place to start, perhaps acknowledging vigilance itself. For HSPs, highly sensitive people, vigilance is kind of part of the trait. That deep processing, the empathy in co-regulation, emotional responsiveness, and picking up subtleties beneath the surface and between the lines. These are all parts of the natural trait of biological sensitivity or vantage sensitivity, environmental sensitivity. And so this vigilance within sensitivity is part of both an individual and a collective mechanism for surviving and thriving as living beings. So hypervigilance then isn't necessarily a separate trait, a separate condition. We might think of it as vigilance sort of overspilling or going further than it might otherwise do. It kicks in when this natural trait of deep processing and attunement becomes a chronic state of alertness where we're unable to switch off, find calmness, relax, access feelings of safety and connection in our nervous system. This can be the result of complex trauma and patterns that are picked up in early years. So sensitivity research around the concept of differential susceptibility speaks of an individual's environment as having a greater impact, for better or worse, on a highly sensitive person than less sensitive counterparts, which means that hypervigilant patterns of defense and self-protection might develop more strongly when a person grows up around conflict or in unstable conditions, unpredictable behaviors and that kind of thing. But it can also be something that we might pick up later in life as we experience the pressures, the demands, the rhythms of the world in which we live. The expectation that we should constantly be striving, to be pushing, to be growing without adequate space to slow and pause and process deeply. So we compiled a list of things that might, indicate that hypervigilance is present. So things like apathy or indifference, where life feels flat. It's as if you're watching it from behind glass. Low proactivity, a focus on getting through the day, disconnected from the possibility of new or creative action and exploration. Connected to that, an inability to act. So you might have a connection to plans. You might think you'd sort of, want to get somewhere else in the future, but those plans remain just written down. You can't quite get yourself to take action on them and move forward. Tearfulness, unusual reactive tears to things that wouldn't otherwise normally evoke those kinds of emotional responses. Brain fog, again, kind of similar. The world feeling distant, focus is difficult. It's really hard to get clear on things in everyday life. Ruminating thoughts, so loops in the mind, the same scenarios playing out again and again, worries, anxieties, that kind of thing. Disrupted circadian rhythm, so sleep and wake cycles are scrambled, and you have disrupted sleep, maybe insomnia. Anxiety or panic attacks, so out of the blue your body might suddenly sound the alarm without any clear cause for it. Low self-esteem, so eroded confidence. You might second guess every move that you're making or every decision that you're taking. And harsh self criticism. So like an inner critic, inner narratives that take center stage and dictate the way that you feel about yourself and the thing that you're saying about other people and the world and the future and all of that kind of thing. So hypervigilance really is an internal story to some degree that says, stay safe by staying alert to danger. It's a healthy, it's a helpful, it's an appropriate message in many contexts, but it's exhausting when we can't switch that off and we carry it everywhere that we go. It drains us, but it also causes disconnection. Over-reading other people's motivations, misreading intentions, suffocating the natural flow of life by analysing everything, ruminating on everything, overthinking things. In the private supplementary episode that I will be sharing with Haven members, I'm going to chat a little bit about the difference between alertness and awareness, and how, as highly sensitive people, we might distinguish between those states and have a look at the impact that being in one or the other has on the way that we feel, the way that we engage with the world. This is something that I've really noticed viewing interactions, especially online, as the difference between the kind of reactivity that appears almost involuntarily as people see, hear, detect what they are primed to notice in other people's words or in news stories, or the way that things are framed. And then comparing that with those who notice what is happening, but are able to think critically about it. They're able to pick things apart and choose their response to what it is that they observe, and to do that in relation to maybe their deeper values and the vision that they carry for their life and for the world. In a sense, I think hypervigilance is the state of our, cultural nervous system at the moment, causing greater division and polarization, defensiveness, aggression, which, of course, in turn exacerbates everything further. Violence is about spinning the wheels and fueling spirals, where each side of the circle gives gas to the pace of the other. But yes, hypervigilance in this sense is a maladaptation of that wise and helpful mechanism. Stay safe, stay ready. We all need people who are vigilant, who are prepared, who are able to detect potential threats emerging around us. And for a highly sensitive person, this natural trait can be impacted by a variety of things. I think each of them overlap and bleed into one another. So we'll just go through some of the potential sources of hypervigilance, where vigilance over tips into this chronic, maybe long-term state of hypervigilance. So as mentioned, early environments. So the nervous system is shaped early in life. Again, the idea of differential susceptibility points to formative environments as having a greater impact on highly sensitive people, for better or worse. For the HSP, growing up in largely safe, nurturing, predictable conditions, they're going to be better equipped to self-regulate and to choose to move between states of vigilance and calm, relaxation, with greater ease and choice. Someone who grew up in a noisy, tense, or unpredictable household, on the other hand, might have their nervous system trained to be always ready to react, always ready for anything to just suddenly happen. Having learned that, this atmosphere could shift at a moment's notice. Even if it feels calm right now, someone could kick off and everything erupts. So it's never safe to let your guard down and think everything's okay. There's always that sort of pending, looming chance that everything will just flip on a sixpence. Then past experiences. We are amazing at adapting and reshaping our inner landscape to respond to external circumstances as human beings. We're incredibly adaptable creatures, which has great benefits. It helps us thrive. But as you are probably well aware, it can also cause us to carry the baggage of the past into our present situation and into how we think about the future. So the nervous system might say a proverbial never again to a painful experience, something that we go through. It's like, no, I don't want to do that. And that can then put it on a constant state of high alert to associated signals and signs that something similar to that past experience is present or on its way. Even if that's just an associated sensation or maybe an environmental cue, something that we sense, either a feeling within us or there's some sensory stimuli like a certain smell or taste or whatever. That it has kind of mapped onto those circumstances. We may be consciously aware of these kinds of triggers, but mostly they happen at a more subconscious level, away from our awareness. And once we become aware of them, we are then, of course, better positioned to process them, to notice them, to respond to them over time. Then the culture around us. So there are different levels of the cultures that we swim in and are surrounded by. We're impacted by all of them in different ways, and hypervigilance can be a result of the intensity of its influence, especially when the cultural stories that we absorb are the opposite of welcoming and safe and nurturing. It's not hard to see the presence of these kinds of things right now. There are obviously elements like the climate crisis, the rise of political authoritarianism and the related social tensions that emerged from that, and economic precarity, the economic conditions that people are living in, and all the stresses that come with that, felt in differing degrees by different people. And of course, then there's the cultural wrapping paper of how these things are talked about, how they're handled, how they're responded to both by leaders in wherever we are in the world, and also in our own dialogues, in the way that we talk about these things with other people, and the information that we absorb, from social media and stuff, the way that information is coming at us and presented, and the lenses through which we experience that stuff. We've learned to become socially vigilant, looking for signs of safety and signals of warning tied to people's identities and the way that they might be socially engaging. We're bombarded with moralizing messages of how to be who we are supposed to be correctly, for example. What we're supposed to do, how people might be perceiving us, What should we care about? How should we demonstrate that we care about that thing? And how can we avoid social ostracism from the groups that we connect to and belong to? And this can all contribute again to a chronic vigilance, not to mention those underlying broader values of society that perhaps glorify busyness and hustle and hard work, not for what they contribute to our shared vision of collective flourishing, but as signs that that's what makes you worthy as an individual. And so this becomes part of another never-ending spiral of nervous system activation. You've got to keep striving, keep showing that you're worthy of acceptance, and never let your guard down in that sense. And then worldview and meaning making. So this is kind of linked to that previous point, but there's also the story that we tell ourselves about the world based on the beliefs that we have come to carry. The obvious example is beliefs that we might have had passed on to us from family members or groups that we've belonged to. Strong religious or political convictions that present an oppositional or divided view of the world. There are people like us and there are people like them. And when we divide the world into kind of binaries, we might become more vigilant in the pursuit of these simplistic categories as buckets to place people and groups and situations, events, experiences into. We fear the potential harm that others can cause us as well. We're constantly thinking, they're sort of devilish, and we might become constantly alert to stay on the right side of our own group as well. The nature of certain worldviews and belief systems is that they teach us that threats are lurking around every corner, that they can be insidious, they can take us over from the inside, and we can't let our guard down, otherwise they will slip in, take control, and be the end of our sort of belonging within that group. And then there are other factors that contribute to hypervigilance that are less directly tied to kind of, I guess, the social or the psychological. There is the physiological conditions like poor sleep or hormone changes, physical capacity, nutritional stuff. This can all impact the threshold at which the body is shouting danger. Biological and neurological factors that are caused by a bunch of other things as well. So none of these are clear-cut and isolated. Everything kind of infuses and shapes everything else in many ways. But this is a good reminder that there are a variety of contributing factors to what might then become a state of hypervigilance. Some are more in our immediate control than others. And it's probably not helpful to think of hypervigilance as something like this one condition to cure. For some, it's a pretty constant state, which can be interrupted and it can be softened over time in different ways. But it's not something that you fix once and for all. I like the image that Deb Daney uses in her work on polyvagal theory when she talks about sort of landscapes of the nervous system. And so something might tip a person's nervous system into sort of stress activation more quickly and rapidly than somebody else's, but we can begin to carve paths back up through the states to safety and connection using things like practices, rituals, anchors, creativity, and connection, social connection as well, which reshape the landscape over time and rewrite the story that we are able to tell ourselves, about others, about the world, especially when we start to introduce strong, safe conditions around us that provide evidence that the world can be a place of safety, connection, and love. And so what might this look like in reality, in practice? I think it starts with slow engagement. Healthy co-regulation is a real key component in, moving out of hypervigilance over time, feeling connected to others in a safe and positive way. And, some of this might sound trite and obvious, but it can also be often overlooked. Yeah, hypervigilance can be caused or at least exacerbated by feelings of disconnection, of loneliness, of isolation. And so this doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination throwing yourself into the deep end socially, but just small, manageable encounters, experiences, steps, noticing the stories that we tell ourselves as we practice this, as we experiment with this stuff. Is this experience underwritten by fear? Am I looking for confirmation that, no, these people are bad, this situation is unsafe? And what does that story sound like if that's what I'm telling myself? And as I notice that story, what can I see around me that is telling me the opposite, that's telling me, actually, no, it's okay here. Maybe it is safe. Maybe it's safe over there. What if I smile at someone? More often than not, a smile will be reciprocated, and a glimmer, a momentary feeling of connection with the world, with life. Strengthen your observation of safety signals. We have a negativity bias. So we tend to notice things that we deem to be bad or unsafe or threatening before we notice anything that might be construed as good. This is kind of a part of our survival mechanism. It's wise to some degree, but it's also not that helpful when we are in safe environments. Slowing down, practicing mindful observation, intentional movement. These can give us a chance to really shift our perspective to those signs of safety that we might start to recognize in the environment around us, and to let ourselves be held by that place rather than bracing for impact, treating it like a hostile territory that wants to reject and eject us. Instead, to be here and now, looking for signs of glimmers, those small cues of joy and connection, a colour, a sound, a feeling, the way something is positioned, a smell, the texture of the chair that you're sitting on, building a picture for ourselves of how this place is welcoming us into it, welcoming us to notice in the way that only we can. And we can build these out in other ways, growing rhythms, rituals, habits from moving towards glimmers rather than trying to avoid things that might act as triggers. Notice, observe, and record what you find. But if this topples into overthinking and rumination, just let it be. Allow yourself to dance with the glimmers, responding to them as they arise rather than trying to control or plan or contrive your way to them. And it's around this that sometimes too much knowledge, too much thinking can be a real obstacle to letting the nervous system reshape itself naturally through the positive conditions that we might start to get in place over time. We might seek faster results or second guess things that we're trying. And the tendency to hoard knowledge, to rush to try and fix things or solve things, nerding out on all the information. This can all itself be part of the hypervigilant response, the hypervigilant pattern, by seeking solutions, to do things perfectly, to learn everything that there is to know about the nervous system, about, the processes going on within us. These might actually be part of that hypervigilant protective pattern. And so in a quest to avoid uncertainty that could bring potential danger with it. And this is obviously a tricky one to navigate because the idea of not doing that feels dangerous. That's what we're mitigating against. So it's a question of, what are some small and safe steps that I could take to let go of that deep need to have a perfect handle on everything? What could I experiment with, allowing to be imperfect? And probably most important, who is a safe and trusted person that could be invited into this experiment with you? Maybe it's a case of asking someone to be okay with things going differently or things not going as well as they usually do for once. And to be aware that the words they might use, if you let something be different or let something be imperfect, are going to have an impact as well. So perhaps we're going to see how this goes. Please don't comment on it because the nervous system might then react to that comment as I need to go back and do things perfectly again. But actually we need to show the nervous system that it's okay not to do it. And it's fine to try it in different ways, or it's okay to let somebody else give this a go or step into this role. You know, we all need environments and relationships where it's safe to fail, to be imperfect, and to laugh about it. Not to laugh at one another, but at the situation and with one another. I think the best route through hypervigilance at times might be just that: humour, playfulness, laughter, where we can be silly, not to take ourselves too seriously. Know that it's safe to be our weird selves, to be who we are at whatever level that is. Again, for many highly sensitive people, you know, if you've had to conceal your natural weirdness, you know, we are all weird in different ways. But if, the kind of sensitivity or the weirdness that we might feel about being more sensitive than it feels appropriate to be, or more sensitive than we feel like we're allowed to be, if we're concealing those things from people who don't seem to get it, hypervigilance through masking, through pretending, through performing is a really normal defense in that situation. If it doesn't feel okay to be you, a hypervigilant protector is going to step in and stop you from revealing too much of yourself. That makes complete sense. So we need to find people, places, projects that allow us to be ourselves. Not to switch one mask for another, which is often the case that we see, in a world of kind of tribalized identities and that kind of thing. You find your people, but then there's this whole new set of unwritten rules that you've got to understand and vigilantly conform to in order to remain a part of that group, to fit in, whatever. But rather, we need people and projects and places where we can experience good faith, unconditional belonging, you know, where we're accepted and acceptable as we are, where we are, who we are. And it can take a long time to chip away at that hypervigilance that's kind of built up within us over a lifetime. The form that stops us from allowing ourselves to be loved, to be accepted, to be unconditionally welcomed by others. But this is something that I've seen happen over time, and it can defrost, it can thaw out. That hypervigilance can just sort of be reshaped, broken away over time. And this is not just about the person being able to trust other people, but it's about trusting and allowing themselves to be who they are around those people who they have learned they can trust. When we live behind a mask for so long that we find it messy and confusing to encounter ourselves, to let ourselves be present in that way, to come out of us in that way. So we might experience a strange paradox in safe environments that suddenly feel dangerous because they are letting us be ourselves, maybe for the first time in a long time, perhaps the first time ever. And so again, that requires patience and time and plenty of trial and error. You know, it's one of the reasons that I keep the doors to the Haven open for people to join and leave as much as they want. Because I've seen this happen a few times where people have really needed time to process the complexity of unconditional acceptance at the level of being. The fact that, you know, there's no rules of what you have to believe, or the worldview you're supposed to hold, or the way that you're supposed to act. It's kind of sense that no, you're welcome, you are accepted, you are enough as you are. And it can take a few goes to accept that you are accepted. It can take a lifetime to realize that. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. Go and record the Haven private supplementary episode, as I said earlier, about awareness and alertness and the impact of the soundtrack that we have playing in our nervous system. So using this metaphor of music and soundtrack, and to think about the impact of that on the way that we see and perceive the world around us and within us and between us. I would love to know what you think of this. Do you have any questions as a result of hearing what I've talked about in this episode? I would love to hear from you, and keep kind of building forwards through this conversation. So if you fancy joining me for the supplementary episode, if you're a Haven member already, then come and chat about that in the forums. If you're not a member and you'd like to be, I would love to welcome you in. You can join us at the-haven.co. And if you've enjoyed this episode and have something to say about it, drop a comment, send me an email through the contact page on the website. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then please do like the video if you indeed like it, and subscribe if you've not already done so and you feel that way inclined. Thank you. All right, I'm going to be back again soon with another episode of the Gentle Rebel podcast. Until then, do remember that you are an artist. The world needs your art. Now go and make somebody's day. Bye-bye.
So shines a good deed in a weary world.
Can all be angels in disguise. We can